Ashikwa giboni 2 minute yo jipemuan. Ozam akana gimakimiko na nga au chimukaba mgego. Ekiduwa dash.
Broken promises, broken hearts in this land that I call home. Broken treaties and broken homes, boarding schools broke apart our ties. But broken things can be broken long, 'cause in our hearts we kept a smile. Take a walk with me and beauty on the reservation. Take a walk and see the beauty of this native nation. Na, 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 na.
As a people, I think it's what's inside of us that helps us get beyond the dark waters of the past. About 900 years ago, some prophets cautioned and urged the Algonquian people to leave New Brunswick, which launched a very slow movement of thousands of Anishinaabe people west who followed the eastern Great Lakes. The people who are here in northern Wisconsin took the northern route and went to Bawating, which is Sault Ste. Marie, and eventually made their way to Madeline Island in the early part of the 18th century. One group came south here to this region, Le Courte, and it was kind of a dangerous thing to do since our enemy, the fox, were living here at that time. And so it was a perilous venture into the region. The hunters found the body of an Odawa Indian, and he was frozen. And they gave him a proper burial because he was a relative of ours. Then they named the place after him, which was Odawa Saigeganing, or Ottawa Lake. Radisson and Grossier had been here perhaps 50 years before that, and they named this site Le Courte. So it had two names. It had a French name, and now it had an Ojibwe name. All the way down the Rice Lake had maple trees and deciduous growth, which is unusual for this northern Wisconsin area. Now, in that deciduous area, there were thousands of deer who were living on the underbrush and the acorns and the grasses. The Ojibwe were deeply connected to white-tailed deer. We oftentimes think they needed the beaver, but they really needed the deer more than they needed the beaver. How the Le Courte people came to stay here begins with the story of Eshpeon. In 1742, a hunting party ventured into this region, and when they finished their hunting that fall, they picked up their camp and they said, okay, it's time to go back to Madeline Island. We've pushed it now, but we need to get back home. What happened was Eshpeon's first newborn son died. He and his wife were so distraught that they buried the baby on that spot. and they refused to leave. They wouldn't return back to Madeline Island. By refusing to leave, they were signing their own death warrant. The Dakota were all around here, and we were in a full-fledged war with them. Eshpeon's father, who was the head of the Bear Clan, he just hugged his son and he said, "We hope to see you in the summer when we come back." Eshpeon waved to them as they left, and they built a small wigwam and remained at that site at Odawa Saige Ganing, the Ottawa Lake, which is today Little Lakota Lake. Eshpeon's father returned in the early fall the next year, in 1743. There they were. They were thriving. And not only that, but Eshpeon had gone over the hill to the Chippewa River area and found wild rice, and he found new beaver. And so what happened next was more families stayed. And then the following summer, more families came, and within 20 years, there were 40 cabins of Ojibwe living at Odawa Saige Ganing. Those early years were good times, but change was coming. Big change. White settlers and their big chief in Washington had their own ideas of what to do with Native people.
The president issued a removal order. They tried to remove all the Chippewas west of the Mississippi. We were told to go to a place called Sandy Lake, which is on the other side of the river in what is now known as Minnesota. And so a lot of our people did go there, and when we went there, there was no food. And so a lot of our people struggled there and died, and a lot of people made their way back in the winter, and a lot more people died. Then a group of our chiefs headed out to Washington, D.C. They did get an audience with the president, and he removed the removal order. That's how the Treaty of 1854 came about. We agreed we would cede the rest of our land holdings in what is the northern third of Wisconsin and also Michigan and Minnesota, and in return we would have permanent reservations. Then when the Treaty of 1854 was signed, you had a few bands relocate themselves onto our reserve, what is now known as Lakota. They still had the same way of life. They still did wild ricing, berry picking, deer hunting, trapping, all those types of things. And we were self-sufficient. We did go off reservation hunting and fishing as well. In the Treaty of 1854, we did not give up that right to hunt and fish in those areas that we ceded.
But those rights would be tested a century later. In the mid-1800s, the loggers came. Our lands were logged because all the forests of northern Wisconsin had been cut over by the lumbermen, and the only thing that was left were the lands around the designated reservation areas. The logging enterprise saw this area denuded of forest all around Lakota. And so small rivers, the channels, they were filled with pine logs, and they were being floated down to market in Menominee and places like Eau Claire where there were huge mills. Check dams had to be built all along the major rivers. And where these sites had these temporary check dams, eventually the Americans decided to build permanent dams to generate electricity and also to control the spring thaw, which flooded the region south of here. It was decided very early, around the turn of the century, that there needed to be a dam on the Chippewa River near the village of Winter. The only problem, of course, was that they were going to flood thousands of acres and destroy the village of Guayawang, several cemeteries, and the wild rice beds.
We looked at it as kind of a genocide, so to speak, because what were we going to do without our wild rice? That was our whole economy. It's how we survived the winter. I mean, even if deer hunting was bad, we always had that wild rice. 1923, the gates closed and the water started rising. Our tribe got caught moving their stuff in chest-high water to high ground.
So the flooding at the Winter Dam left that village 25 feet under dark waters. Those were dark times. It was really a death throw for the Ojibwe people, who suffered for many generations and still do today.
It was devastating to our tribe, where once we were self-sufficient 100%, then now we became kind of dependent, and we've been struggling to catch up ever since.
The graves were inundated, and they still wash up. Yet there would be skeletons washing up. I can't tell you the misery that that caused to the families here. Ceremonially, we had to go and reinter those remains. It's emotionally devastating for people. They suffered because that could have been their mother, their grandmother, their uncle.
It bears little resemblance to what it was. And so it's always important for me to always remind people of that, because they see it for the beauty right now. But if the tribal members can give their perspective and the history of what happened there, one could say it's ugly.
After dams destroyed many of our homes from the outside, other forces threatened to destroy our culture from within the homes that were left standing. We refer to the concept of deculturalization as acculturation or assimilation. The Bureau of Indian Affairs outlawed the practice of tribal religion, and that was never more visible on this reservation than in the year 1878, when the BIA prevented the arrival of the Drum Society, the Ceremonial Drum Society, which was brought here by the Mille Lacs tribe from Minnesota. The BIA agent called out the federal marshals to arrest anyone who participated in those ceremonies, and also to cut off the annuity payments and the ration goods to those families. And in effect, what they were doing was declaring war on the families and possibly even causing the death of people during the wintertime. Those religions had to go underground, and they were practiced in hiding. And the church worked in concert with the Bureau of Indian Affairs to stop the practice of the Medewiwin spiritual ceremony and also the Chedeweg Ogitchidasad.
A long time ago, our elders, when they were in boarding schools and they weren't allowed to speak the language, they were punished in some way.
Most of the people that were in boarding schools, they don't even lose a beat when they're talking. I went to boarding school. I was sent to Pipestone, Minnesota when I was 7 years old, and 3 years later I came back. They don't say anything about how they felt about it, because it was just understood that they were going to have to go to boarding school.
When people become educated in the dominant society, they simply exchange, their ways of culture for the other. And so all of these elements play a big role in changing a value system of a people. And when we make that conscious exchange and we find the conveniences of the mainstream society and with its automobiles and its electricity and its television, then we're just hastening the acculturation of a tribal society.
Federal government and others, they put a lot of money, millions of dollars, and a lot of time and a lot of effort to get rid of our culture, get rid of our religion, get rid of our language. So nowadays, we're doing everything we can to help restore that. Don't always go at everything with anger. Learn from it, remember it, but move forward and overcome it. We gotta look at the long-term survival.
You know, the hardest part of preserving the Ojibwe language is factoring in the need for utility. If a language doesn't have utility, if it doesn't have purpose, it's going to die. And it doesn't take the Bureau of Indian Affairs to kill a language. The people will lose the language if they stop using it in our larger reservation communities.
Our elders didn't pass the language on because they were punished when they were in boarding schools if they spoke the language. And so therefore, when they came back home, they didn't want to pass that down to their children and have that punishment go to them.
The elders told us that we need to communicate with the spirits that are all around us in the Ojibwe language. And that if we ever walked away from the language and failed to use it, then we would no longer be Indians anymore.
Without our language, we don't have a culture. You cannot have one without the other. We have to speak in our language in order to speak to the Creator, because that's the language He gave us. He gave it to us as a gift. And if we're not using that gift, it'll be taken away.
For our prayers to be answered, you got to speak Ojibwe for the Gitchimanidu to listen to you. You speak to him in Ojibwe. You cannot speak English because he does not understand English. Right now, we're almost designated as being the elder to keep things going and try to encourage the kids to learn the language and live their culture.
Ashigwa giwani tumene iyo Ojibwe Ozam akana gimakamigo na nga au chimukaban gego. Ikiduwag dash chiaya ag debiashesh kamagan ishpen widukudadi yang. Ambesana iniguk widukudadi da Ojibwe moyang. And that phrase means right now we're losing our language because the white man had taken everything away from us. But our elders tell us that we can bring the language back if we try hard and help each other. So let's try hard and bring our language back.
We can teach the children the language, and we've got over 100 kids now that have conversational use of the language.
Wajaya, Wangajig, Gikinu Amaguziyang, Imagaye, Endayang, Minawa Endaji, Anukiyang.
Well, I had an injury on my head from running in the wall, and then I fell down. For a couple seconds, I couldn't talk, couldn't think of a word. Somebody said, say something. And all I said was, Misko Gijik Indigenous Cause, Odawazak Aganing New Jaba, Magizine New Name, meaning my name is Red Sky, and I'm from Lake of the Short Ears, Lakudare. But Magizine New Name is my Eagle clan. Couldn't think of any simple words. That's all I could think of was my name and who I am, where I come from. I just can't explain it. It's just something powerful.
As a tribe, we need to begin using the language again. We need to use it in our businesses, in our conversations with one another, even if it's a little bit of the language. The more that we see the value once more of the language, the more that our adults will begin working on it. It's a language of reverence, it's a language of joy, and it had, at one time here on our reservation, it had a lot of power. Our schools give us a pathway to preserve our language and culture. I see the elders of many different societies and cultures in America wringing their hands over the plight of their own children and grandchildren. And they too worried about the loss of their own values and the loss of their languages and heritage. And it's no different at La Courte. We're worried about the change of our young people, but at La Courte we started our own schools.
There was a time when students were getting really upset about racial tension and people not understanding the need for students to know who they are, to teach about Ojibwe culture, to have drum practice. Those were not available in public schools. So then there was a group of students who suddenly decided, we've had enough of this. We want our own school. So they had a big walkout. They actually physically walked out of school.
We started our own school in 1975, and that was very daring to do almost 40 years ago. We believed that we could educate our children and stop the loss of the language and the values.
There's a lot more kids singing and drumming and all that. I've never seen so many kids involved in my lifetime.
When I see the young people sit at the drum and really concentrate and try and sing, that is joy. It makes me feel good. But, here at our school, and our students are learning a little bit of what it is to be Anishinaabe.
We have a language immersion school that has been very successful in kindergartners through 6th grade. Now we have a lot of little kids out there speaking the language, speaking it in school but also at home, and they're fully fluent.
We have 239 students in the LCO Ojibwe school, and we have maybe as many as 600 in the public school at Hayward. Now, some parents believe that culture and language are vital to the long-term security of their own children, so they choose La Courte. So it's really a matter of choice. The richness of the curriculum at Hayward or the specialties that we have at La Courte. Here at La Courte, we offer every level of education for our children.
We give instruction not only in higher education, but we also value our traditions and our language as well. So every single class has teachings that we are given from elders or community members. When students walk through the doors at the college here, they have a purpose why they want to go to school. Each one has a certain dream, each one has a certain goal, and it's up to us to figure out what those are.
Our founders felt that it was vital to the health and well-being of starting a college here to have an open door policy. So it's not specific to LCO tribal members. Our college is not specific to Native people. We have Native and non-Native faculty, staff, and students here. And that's what makes our institution as unique as what it is.
We believe that given the opportunity and given the time, we can build a program that's stronger here at La Courte. We've got some mighty fine teachers, educators. We're going to develop some things here that I know is going to attract and draw more students back to LCO.
We've had a couple students that go to college and come back, and now they want to come back here to teach. I think that's an accomplishment.
I can't criticize people from other cultures and other societies because I've consciously chosen some of those aspects of life as well. But there's something special about being home. It's a totally different way of life here. And so I just feel so much better now that I'm home again.
I've been in cities before. I don't like it. All the buildings, they're just taller than the trees. Although we've had these great virgin white pines, it's still not the same thing. It's just still not the same thing.
Everything that we need is right out here behind us, so that's why they came here. Now we get to be part of that and share, and we invite people to come up here because Le Courte is a very special place, and a lot of people that come here for some reason don't want to leave, and we know why.
That's just the way of life. That's the way Anishinaabe lived a long time ago. They lived with hunting, fishing, wild ricing, maple sugar. That was their life a long time ago. That's what we try to teach the children here, what the old people used to do.
Our kids have to walk in two worlds. They have to walk in the white world, the white man's way with the technology and the education, and they have to hold on to what we're teaching them in this world, on this road, is our Indian values, their spiritualness, keep in touch with who they are.
When I go to a ceremony, it's like I'm going to another world. I feel differently about, myself, because that's who I am. When that ceremony is done, then I need to come back to the other world.
People are different here. Their values are so tied together within their families, and there's just a great appreciation that people have for one another here.
My father died when I was 4. It's kind of hard growing up without him. But I've had these elders to help me with, like Jim Miller and Louis White. They've helped me a lot. I've cried so many times with Jim, and he's helped me a lot.
The difference is the way that people treat each other. People here hug. People here know the grandchildren of others, and they know the way we're related. We have a common sense of respect for the land, and we have an appreciation for the way we communicate with spirits that are all around us.
There's this perception that Native Americans are history and that they really have no knowledge that we're still here. We're a highly adaptable people. We have computers, we live in houses, we have TVs, we have cars. We are not just part of history, only in books.
What we're trying to instill in them also is to be proud of themselves and to be happy of who they are as a Anishinaabe person. They should feel good about themselves.
After our tribe won the litigation in the Voight hunting and fishing treaty rights case, we faced a horrendous backlash from the non-Indian community, our neighbors around Le Courte. As we were anticipating the backlash, we began holding meetings with members of the Hayward Lakes Association. We got to know these people, and the next thing you know, we had this friendship that went beyond the bigger issues. Everywhere else there was conflict, danger, and thousands of protesters, and the need for police protection. But at Le Courte, we avoided it because we joined hands with the fathers of the county. And we just talked about ways that we could work together and ameliorate the concerns that the sports fishers had about the walleye fish and the deer in the forests. We got over the barriers just simply by learning that the hearts of people, no matter what their race is, bleeds the same color of blood.
Many tribes have, as part of the very fiber of who they are, have an openness and respect of difference.
The best part of being Ojibwe is having an open heart. May not mean much, but just having an open heart. I could say the less you have, the more you can give.
There's a reverence here that the traditional people have and their show of respect to one another. But this is really something special here at the Courte. It's just the most special place on earth.